Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us at the first panel of the 2023 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Jackson Spilka. I am a first-year student at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and it is my honor to introduce our panel today, Revamping America's Pastime, the Effect of Rule Changes in Baseball. Joining us today are our panelists, Executive Vice President of Baseball Operations at Major League Baseball, Morgan Sword. We have prolific baseball writer and statistician, Bill James. And we have the Senior Vice President of On-Field Operations at Major League Baseball, Raul Ibanez. And they will be moderated by our Sports Center anchor, Kevin Negandhi. The panel will run for 45 minutes, and there will be 10 minutes for questions and answers. If you would like to submit a question, we will be using Twitter, using the hashtag #BaseballRules, and our moderator will pick the questions from there. With that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Kevin.
Jackson, thank you so much. Good morning, and it's great that we could start the conference with a topic that is a hot-button issue, no doubt, this week. But really, there's an elephant in the room, and we need Raul to address when his GQ shoot is scheduled later on today. Because, my goodness, that pic that you had up there, you were sharp.
Thanks for bringing that up. That was really at the forefront of my mind when I walked in and looked at it. I was like, we have to address that picture. That was a long time ago. Sorry about that. A little much.
So spring training's underway. It's great to see palm trees, especially if you live in the Northeast, and a lot of sun in Florida and Arizona. And the big topics, of course, is baseball. And when you look at your watch, and how am I watching a game that's inside 3 hours while scoring is up? So let's address that first with Morgan. From the 10,000-foot point of view, what were the changes, specifically the 3 changes made this offseason that we are seeing now at the major league level?
Sure. So we implemented a pitch timer, which times the periods of time between pitches, between hitters, and between innings. We are restricting defensive shifting and where the infielders can play. And then we made the bases a little bit bigger.
What's been the response, Raul, from when you talk about players specifically and the feedback you've gotten in just over a week?
So well, we've gotten a lot from a lot of players is that they're excited to play defense, to be able to, create on the field. And pretty much for the most part, it's been, we'll adapt, we'll figure it out. Things are happening faster than we're accustomed to, but guys are figuring it out pretty quickly. Now, at the end of the game, nobody wants to play a 4-hour game that can be played in 2 hours and 55 minutes or 2 hours and 45 minutes. Nobody wants to play a 4-hour game. So from that perspective, they're really excited. And the people in the dugout, coaches and managers have been very, very supportive.
We'll get into game specifics and the feedback that you've gotten specifically that we've seen impacting the outcome of a game that we saw on Saturday between the Braves and the Red Sox. But Bill, from your perspective and what you've kind of watched in the last week, nearly 100 games to pick from, your thoughts on the new rules?
I'm very optimistic. It's past time. Mostly, I think on the way over here, a gentleman said we moving too fast. Well, yes, we're rushing stuff to get stuff done that should have been done 30 years ago. I know a lot of people don't know that there was a rule in the books when I first became a baseball fan that restricted the amount of time between pitches. Pitcher was supposed to deliver the ball within 25 seconds. No one ever enforced the rules, so I guess it eventually went away. But there always should have been some sort of manner to keep the game moving along, and it's great that they finally have it.
Morgan, the feedback, the data. We talked earlier today, and you get it every single morning. You get the feedback of the games and the pace. What can you tell us and share with the audience?
Yes, we've played 95 games so far, spring training. The games are down about 24 minutes relative to spring training last year. Run scoring's up a little bit. Batting average is up. Stolen base activity is up. And we're starting to see the number of violations tail off a little bit. Players, coaches, umpires get adjusted. So we're early. We got a lot of spring left to go, but
right now, every number is good.
Of the 3 rules, Bill, which one do you think could have the biggest impact?
Well, the obvious impact is the pitch timer. But Morgan didn't mention the rule limiting the number of breaks in the action, basically limiting how many. Basically, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, basically they prohibited the pitcher from standing on the mound and throwing to first base as often as he wants to. And I think that actually is going to have more impact on the base stealing than the larger bases will. I'd like to see more trying to move around the bases and less trying to see how far you can hit the ball and strike out. I'm optimistic. I hope it works.
The bases have expanded from 15 to 18 inches, right? And Raul, as a former player, the idea of what Bill just brought up, where a pitcher can only throw twice to first, and you're sitting there and you're thinking about stealing, how does that change your approach specifically now in this day and age where we don't often see steals? This is not the Ricky Henderson, the Vince Coleman era anymore.
Yeah, I think, well, personally, maybe I would have stolen 6 bases instead of 5. It wasn't a big part of my game.
I don't remember you stealing 5.
You're probably right.
You're right. I think for the guys that is part of their game, being 3 inches closer, actually 4.5 inches closer between first and second base in a world of replay, I think it makes a significant difference. And catchers are being taught to to throw the ball up the line so they could use instant replay, tag the body. So those 3 inches or 4.5 inches would be a big deal to guys who are base stealers.
Bill, one of the things I noticed, you brought up the idea of the pitcher going back to first. How do you view the shift? What are your thoughts on that changing now with the idea of just 4 infielders inside?
Well, I'm trying so hard to be positive. But I don't see the point in it, and I don't think it'll have much of any impact, honestly. If you want to regulate it and make the game look more normal, it's okay, I guess. But I don't think there's any real impact to that, any significant impact, and I don't see the need for the rule.
Morgan, your response on the idea of why you guys have this rule?
Yeah, so all 3 of these rules came out of a pretty intensive piece of fan research that we did, where rather than ask them about their views on specific rule changes, which are hard to come up with on the fly, we asked them about what they want to see more of in baseball games and what they want to see less of in baseball games. And the answers wouldn't surprise anybody. When the plays that we need to deliver more of are stolen base attempts, doubles, triples, great defensive plays, right? Those are the things that engage fans, keep you watching, keep you involved. And what do you want to see less of? You want to see less of mound visits, pickoff attempts, pitching changes, walks. We set out to test sort of dozens of these rules across the minor leagues the last 2 years, and many of them ended up on the cutting room floor, either didn't work or weren't practical or had some implementation issues. But these 3, individually and collectively, we felt really improved the outcomes, but really the aesthetics of the game. And I think that there is, as silly as it sounds, there is something to having infielders play where they've played for 150 years and move them back to where they used to be. For some fans, that makes no difference. I think, take my dad as a random example. It would make my dad legitimately angry to see a line drive to right field that was a ground out all of a sudden in baseball. And angry to the point where he would stop watching the game. And for better or for worse, we got a lot of fans that are in that bucket. But I think what we've heard from infielders in the first couple of weeks here is putting them at their traditional positions, they feel allows them to range, to make great defensive plays, and kind of forcing them out of their optimal positions puts the game back in the players' hands and allows them to dictate outcomes rather than who has the best algorithm for who is positioning their infield the best. But I think anybody that says they're confident about what the effect of this shift restriction rule is going to be, I don't feel like it's probably being honest with you, because we don't know. I think like a lot of it depends upon batter behavior and how hitters adjust. Raul and I were talking on the way back from the Bruins game last night about, what do we think hitters are going to do? And you should probably actually share what you think on that.
Sure. My take on the shift is that it doesn't mean you're a pull hitter. It just means that when you hit the ball on the ground, you become a pull hitter. And I think if you go back historically and look at some of the hitters that spray the ball around, or that we perceived that sprayed the ball around the most in history, they probably got more hits to the pull side and up the middle than they did carving a ball down the third baseline. So what it really does is it does impact the hitter behavior, because there's only so many times, as Morgan said, you're going to line out 200-foot ground outs, and eventually you just start thinking, well, I'm going to try to hit it over the shift, because it's very difficult to adapt, especially in today's day and age where they have the data. If they have 5 years of data on you, it becomes a problem, because if the pitcher executes his pitch, and they have the data, and really bright people, I mean, you have 20, 30 analysts that are working on the scouting report or advanced scouting reports, attacking you specifically to your weakness. It's really hard to carve a ground ball to short on a 93 mile per hour cut fastball or 100 mile per hour, 2,400 RPM spin fastball at the top of the strike zone. So I do think it's going to have a positive impact on the game and on player behavior. I was telling Morgan yesterday, at the end of my career, I was playing with the great Albert Pujols, and I probably watched him in a 3-month span hit 15 balls up the middle where there was a guy just standing there, and you look up and he was hitting 240 with a still like a 780, 800 OPS.
Yeah.
But it really impacts not only the way that guys hit, but how they approach hitting.
Let's expand on that mentally, especially the grind of 6-7 months, 162 games. What does that do to a hitter when you're coming up? You already see where everybody's at. And you're Albert Pujols, you see somebody already playing up in the hole, and you're like, what am I going to do? What does that do?
It can be, I mean, when you're struggling, it feels like there's 11 guys on the field or 12 guys on the field. The shift does have a little bit of that feel, the mindset part of it, where you get in the batter's box, you look and you're like, they're all stacked over here, and the right thing to do is I'm going to try to hit the ball over there. But, for a left-handed hitter, let's say, the shortstop, if we go back in time, he's there because he handles the baseball the most out of everybody on the field. So you shift this side of the field and you leave the shortstop there. And the amount of times that guys would go up to bat, guilty, me included, and you hit a line drive, I'm going to hit the ball the other way, and you hit a line drive at the one guy standing over there. It can be demoralizing. I chuckle about it, but for a player, it's not a lot of fun.
Bill, you want to weigh in on this from the analytic perspective here when you look at the shift?
Raul mentioned the ball hit up the middle. The biggest effect is if you can open up the middle a little bit, because that actually is where the most hits went before people started using shifts. More hits went right up the middle than anywhere else. The more went there than through the hole between first and second. And that will be a large effect. As to the psychological effect, you have to remember how old I am. And back in the prehistory, when we didn't really have any understanding of why one park's effects were different than another, it was a common thing for people to say that the reason everybody hit a lot of home runs in Atlanta was the psychological effect. You go to Atlanta, you're expecting to hit home runs, so you hit home runs. Totally absurd explanation. And I guess maybe because of that and similar experiences, I'm skeptical of the notion that the psychological impact on the hitters is going to be anything. The measurable effect is going to be an increase in batting average of 4 to 6 points. And I don't really buy the theory about trying to loft the ball. Hitters have been trying to loft the ball for 100 years. But, it's a tension of different ideas, and we'll work it out. And I'm not like, I never hated the shift. Gave my people something to do. It's fine. I don't care.
How do you think front offices will approach this with these changes? And you mentioning batting averages going up.
Right, a little bit. Well, yeah, we'd like batting averages to go back to the league batting averages last year were in the 240s, and you'd like them to be back up in the 270 range. So this change is not going to get us there, but it's a step in the right direction. Front offices will react as they always have by trying to figure out how to beat it. Okay, we got these new rules. How do we do the same things we've always done, only with the new rules? And but that's encouraging. In a sense, the game is a war between the front offices, who are trying to figure out a way to make the game slow and boring, and the Morgan and Raul and other people who are trying to figure out a way to make it fast and exciting. So Good luck to you guys.
Yeah, we have some very intelligent adversaries in that war. Yeah, and some of you may have watched the Red Sox game yesterday. They actually took Jarren Duran, their left fielder, against Kyle Schwarber yesterday and moved him into that sort of rover position in short right field and had their other two outfielders playing in traditional sort of center and right. So giving up literally half of the field with nobody standing there, which is permitted under the rules. And you may see that against guys like Carl Schwarber or Joey Gallo, but I guess we feel okay about that because one, it's still sort of suboptimal, and two, there's a big risk, right? And I think the first time that you get a bloop over third base that ends up as a triple or an inside the park home run, embarrassment, honestly, on its own may sort of curb that behavior a little bit, but clubs are experimenting with it. We may see it more, particularly against the pull lefties, and we're going to learn with everybody else.
Bill, you mentioned something that it's not a change that you think would drive batting averages up to 270. Is there a change right now you think in baseball that could drive the batting average up?
Not a single change. There are small changes that you could make that if you made several of them and connected the dots, they could return baseball to a more normal form. For example, if you just move the batters 1 inch further, the batter's box back just 1 inch, it would make a difference because it would make trying to hit the ball 500 feet less productive and thus would encourage hitters to instead meet the ball. If you just increase the weight, the minimum weight of a bat, I don't think there is a minimum weight of the bat, but if you just maybe there is there a minimum?
I don't think so.
Yeah, if you just put a minimum weight on bats and increase that by a tiny bit, that would favor the guy who makes contact rather than the person who tries to hit the ball as far as possible. If you can't move the batter's box back 18 inches, or move the pitcher's mound back 18 inches, because pitchers have been working since they were 5 years old to learn how to make that curveball break at exactly the right moment so that it just hits the outside part of the plate, just as it crosses the plate. And if you just move the pitcher's mound back 18 inches, every ball is going to be in the dirt. Every curveball is going to be in the dirt. You can't do it. But you could move the mound back by an inch, and then in another 3 years you could move it back by another inch, and that would counteract the effect of more and more pitchers throwing harder and harder to an extent. At least it seems to me it would. I'd value the insight of someone who's actually played the game at a significantly higher level than before.
I'm really curious to your point, Bill. Like, what would be your reaction to some of these minor tweaks that Bill's suggesting?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Honestly, I'd never really thought about that, but an inch does make a difference. Charlie Manuel, our manager in Philly, used to say a little means a lot when it comes to hitting, and I totally agree with that. But yeah, I mean, I think the other side of that coin also is player behavior is influenced by compensation, right? And so it's OPS and slug, and WOBA and metrics like that are highly valued in the game, and players really just follow what gets you, what gets you a college scholarship as a player is you have to be able to impact the baseball. Mm-hmm. What gets you signed professionally as a player is you have to be able to impact the baseball, and what gets you to the big leagues is you have to be able to impact the baseball. So I do think that along with what Bill's saying, if you change what clubs valued, it will have an impact on player behavior.
Player behavior. A lot of that is routine. You go to the ballpark at a certain time. You're aware of when you have BP. You're aware of when you're throwing. When you look at the routine being kind of thrown off a little bit with some of these rule tweaks, especially the timing, getting in the box within 8 seconds, the pitcher making sure the ball's out, how much of an effect will that play, not just in the spring, but let's just say the dog days of the summer, the player's routine? What's been the feedback?
So I think early on, Morgan said this earlier, we're really thankful and grateful that we have spring training to where players get a 4-week time period to be able to adapt to the rules. And what we did see in the minor leagues was after 4 to 6 weeks, we got to well below 1 violation per game. I think it was 0.5. Is that right, Mike Morgan? So we got to 0.5 violations. So you will adapt. Guys are adapting right now.
Yeah.
And it was really no different than, say, facing a Cliff Lee or a Mark Burley who worked really fast. And you just knew something good or bad was going to happen very quickly.
Yeah.
So players are adapting right now. We're already seeing it in the data. And they're really, at the major league level, these are the best athletes in the world and the most adaptable as well.
Pitchers love it. At least that's been the feedback. Patrick Corbin talked about it. It's a little bit faster. Max Scherzer was raving about it. From the hitter's perspective, are they comfortable with it right now? Because again, pitchers, it's like, all right, you're on my time right now, not your time. Has that changed the course here, how batters approach the box?
Yeah, I think that, so when you hear a guy like Max Scherzer,
Yeah.
who's an elite ace, I would expect nothing less than that type of mindset and mentality from Max Scherzer, or Corbin Burns, where these guys are elite aces. They're going to look at it through that lens as if they have the advantage. And I think we've talked to some of the guys who are elite hitters, and some of those guys have said, well, I think I can use it to my advantage as well. So that becomes a whole new cat and mouse game that's going on, and I think it's really good for the game.
Yeah, yesterday, we showed a highlight of the 20-second strikeout. You guys see that? It took 20 seconds from the start of the at-bat, 3 straight pitches, strikeout, because of the pace and the timing of this. Timing's fantastic here. But, Bill, I want to get your thoughts on the idea, when you're a pitcher, you do not have the 30 to 40 seconds that we saw in between. Do you anticipate the velocity coming down consistently, maybe a tick down, because you don't have that time to rev up again in between pitches?
I hadn't thought about it, but no, intuitively I wouldn't anticipate any change in average velocity speeds, pitch velocities. The pressure really is more from the batter's standpoint than it is from the pitcher's standpoint. I don't know that many pitchers really want to stand out there and take a minute between pitches. They mostly, I think, want to, let's get the show on the road here. But also, I'd point out that it's contrary to the nature of sports to give the athlete time to do what he wants to do. And batters may say, "Well, I need to get comfortable in the box." Well, you're playing basketball. You don't get to get comfortable before the other team's running a fast break. Get the hell down there and defend the fast break. Or in football, Patrick Mahomes changes the play 3 times in the middle of the play. You don't get a call timeout and adjust. Oh, wait a minute, he's going that way. I need to call timeout and get myself comfortable here. It's not the nature. I think young athletes enjoy it, and it becomes less enjoyable probably. Better paid, but less enjoyable the more you play. I'm just guessing. I don't think it's the nature of the sport that everybody's supposed to get comfortable before they do everything. It's a direct opposite of the nature of sports. You're trying to do something that by its nature is supposed to be hard.
One of the things that we see, specifically to Bill's point, in the NBA, you have a shot clock. In the NFL, you have a play clock, right? It's winding down. Specifically in the NFL, sometimes that thing is down to 0 and the ball is like snapped right at the moment. And you're like, whoa, they didn't snap it on time. We may encounter that. We saw that specifically last Saturday in that Braves-Red Sox game. Bases loaded, full count, 9th inning, and the prospect, Cal Conley, punched out. Game ends. Morgan.
In a tie.
In a tie,
Yeah.
and Cal is laughing his butt off because it's spring training, but the consequences get serious when it actually matters. How have you guys anticipated this concept where suddenly the play clock is playing a role in the outcome of a game where you're going to get a called strike or a called ball and not actually see the action?
Yeah. Well, I think in an ideal world, right, you would get all of the benefits that come along with this timer, with the shorter games and the better pace and the crisper, more active sport, without ever having it impact the competition, right? And unfortunately, that's just literally impossible. There's no way to do that. And we've tried much more subtle ways to get at this issue by forcing people to stay in the batter's box. We've even sent letters to players just saying, please play faster. That didn't really work very well. And it's amazing, right? You introduce like a competitive penalty to taking your time, and almost overnight, the game is transformed, right? And I think that the best we're going to hope for is one that we use spring training to get everybody adjusted and to minimize the number of violations that occur, particularly in big spots, which in the minor leagues, that's what happened. We were at the, for a given team, you'd go about 4 games between violations at the minor league level last year. So that's kind of the rate that we're hoping to get to at the big leagues. And second, I think we had a long discussion with our umpiring staff about how we wanted to enforce this rule because, we had a lot of incoming saying, you know what, umpires need to have some feel, right? Veteran pitcher, maybe back off. 9th inning, maybe back off. Bases loaded, maybe back off. And, we've decided to go completely in the other direction, which is this is a rule, like any other rule now. And this is the way baseball is now going forward. And we should call it precisely. We should call it consistently. We should call it against all players in all situations. And the result of that is going to be every once in a while you get, we're going to have probably a timer violation impact a major league game this year. Maybe decide one, maybe be the last play one. And I think that from our perspective, when you look at all of the pros that come along with these rule changes and that as sort of the lone, in my view, kind of potential con, it's a trade I'd make every day, but we haven't yet thought of a way to completely eliminate that risk.
How much pressure is on the umpires right now?
A lot, yeah. The umpires are doing a great job. They are, I was down in Arizona last weekend, and in spring training, the way we do it is each crew is a mix of major league umpires and minor league umpires, and the minor league guys have lived with this world for some of them 2 years now, and they're total pros at running the timer. They know all the rules. It's second nature for them. The major league guys, this is all new. They haven't really seen it, and there's a lot of detail that goes into kind of when the timer begins and when you wave it off, and it takes a while to learn. But we've been very pleased with the umpires. They're enthusiastic about it. I think. If I'm speaking for them, they believe this is really good for baseball, and they view part of their job as running the game and keeping the pace moving. And they finally have actually a stick available to them, when it doesn't happen. So, but it's a change for those guys, and they're leaning into it so far.
If you follow me on Twitter, if see me on TV, I do not hide my love and passion from where I'm from, which is Philadelphia. And there was a running joke on social media this past week that we would not have seen the Bryce Harper home run in the NLCS because he took too much time. We wouldn't have seen the World Series Game 3 home run because he took way too much time in the box. Have you thought about that? Now, everything can sound great right now, but like in the postseason where that could be taken away, that magic, that build up to an at-bat where the crowd is losing its mind, you got the focus on the TV conversation, the music is blasting, and you could lose a moment like that that is celebrated throughout baseball, that this is the magic of the postseason?
I think you're going to see that same moment, and it's just going to move a little more quickly.
Okay, I hope. What's the fairest criticism you've received so far from a player about these new rules?
Not really real criticism. It's just we have to adapt. We're adapting, we're learning. I'll get used to it, I'll get accustomed to it. And to Morgan's point, once you put the rules out there, you present them to the players matter-of-factly, guys will adapt. They, like I said before, these are the best players in the world, and they adapt very, very quickly. If not, you don't get to play at that level, and you certainly don't get to play there for a long period of time. So these guys are really adaptable, and they're enthusiastic. A lot of the feedback that we're getting, especially getting off the field sooner. When you start thinking about the cumulative effect of fatigue throughout the course of a season, a guy who plays 142 games, getting off the field 20, 30 minutes times 142 games, it becomes a really significant and substantial time off your feet. And in a world of workload management, it makes a real impact. It's a really long and grueling season, and that's one of the effects that we're hearing from players is their excitement about that.
That's really interesting. Bill, your thoughts on that?
The one way to think about it is the tension between selfish and community-oriented behavior. From the community standpoint, I suspect every player is in favor of playing the games at a quicker pace. The problem is selfish behavior, and I don't mean that in a terribly negative sense, but each player wants to take as much time as he can to get himself as ready as he can to do what he has to do. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it is selfish behavior. It's I'm doing what is good for me, and the fact that it slows the game down a little bit, but everybody slowing the game down a little bit slows the game down a lot, and you have to legislate. It's the nation's, one of the aspects of the nation's political problem is that we cannot agree on how to get everybody to focus on community-oriented behavior rather than selfish-oriented behavior, which has cumulative effects that no one is thinking about as they do their own selfish little thing.
My colleague, Hall of Famer Tim Kirchin, brought this up, that he thinks changes had to be made, but too many all at once. Your thoughts? Is too many changes, Bill, right now, all at once? Can that be overwhelming?
Yeah, it's too many all at once because we should have started doing this stuff 40 years ago, and instead we waited 40 years till somebody addressed the issue. So yeah, it's too many all at once, and let's get on with it.
What other changes need to be made, Bill? You've got the ears of Morgan and Raul. What, from that perspective, they try this year, it works, you move forward. What other changes would you like to see in the game?
We talked about this earlier, but I would like to see a systematic effort to drive batting averages up and power-oriented and strikeouts down. I do think this is literally true. I grew up in the Sandy Koufax era, right? The average hitter now strikes out more often than Sandy Koufax struck people out. And I don't know that that's optimal for the game. I think if we could get more balls in play, more outstanding fielding by the second baseman and the shortstop, I think that would be good for the game, and I think there are a lot of different ways to, you move the fences back a little bit, you can make them a little bit higher. I know this is too radical and it's probably never going to happen, but a ball hit right down the line 330 feet doesn't have to be a home run. It can be a double. And there have been parks in the past where a ball hit right down the line and into the seats wasn't a home run. It's not wrong. So I think there are a million things you could do to nudge the game in that direction.
Morgan, when we originally talked, you had mentioned like 3 potential scenarios of rule changes, and one, this group passed the test. What did not pass the test that you guys are still considering maybe down the road?
Sure, yeah. So, out of that fan research came 2 sort of obvious but important objectives for us. One is to improve the pace and reduce the length of our games. And, we're pretty confident that the timer is a sort of turnkey solution to that issue, and that what you're all going to see on the field this year is going to be materially better and more entertaining on that dimension. The second is to increase the amount of action in the game, as Bill was referring to. And driving the strikeout rate down is really important. Increasing batting average is really important. And there is no analogous sort of turnkey solution on the strikeout issue, at least we feel. And it's likely going to come as the cumulative effect of a lot of more subtle type changes. We got a lot of them out there. We've talked a lot about a potential implementation of an automated strike zone in the big leagues. One that I personally like that no one else seems to is applying the drop third strike rule to all pitches, where if it gets away from the catcher, you can just bolt for first base and see if you can get there. Nobody likes that except for me. I think it's good. We've talked about changes to the equipment, changes to the playing surface, changes to outfield dimensions, and fortunately, most of these things are realistic. And we have an amazing tool available in the minor leagues to be able to create kind of an experimental environment where we literally do A/B testing in the minor leagues, and we run half the season under one set of rules and the other half under the other, or league by league, or and you can get great information. And part of the reason I think this timer is working the way it is we knew with historic precision kind of what was going to happen this spring in a way that we never would have in the olden days. So we have, I think this is phase one of what there probably is more coming, but with every single one of these things, I think we always try to grade it on this scale of, is this a reasonable change that baseball fans are going to support, or are we veering towards something that's not baseball anymore, and something that is going to offend the sensibilities of the people in the game, the people that love the game, that's a very subjective scale, but there's lots of things that would work that would just irritate people too much to make it worth it. So I think but it's an exciting effort. I've been just very pleased that the whole baseball community, our field managers have been like with us 100% on all of this. Our players, our umpires, I mean, all of the people you would expect to be very negative about this, I think all realize that we're in a very important time for this sport right now, and that more drastic action is going to be, a big benefit.
When you described some of the ideas, I stuck with a hot button topic, and that is automated strike zones. How close are we to that concept?
We are getting there. We are going to be using an automated strike zone across AAA this season. There are two big questions that are outstanding for us. The first is the format, or the way that we deploy the technology, right? So we have a tracking system that works great. We're able to produce calls to the umpire consistently, reliably. But our first effort at it was to just use the system to call every pitch, and put an earpiece in the umpire, tell him ball or strike, and then he or she would make the call. And interestingly, we got a really loud negative reaction from players and coaches about that system. So last season we tested what's called a challenge format, where the system's kind of running in the background, the human umpires calling the game, and then a couple times per game the players can actually challenge pitches. And that was much more popular among the on-field group, and I think achieved a lot of the benefits that an automated zone would have. So we're going to be kind of testing both formats in the minor leagues this year. And then the second issue that is unresolved and is proving very tricky is geometry of the zone. So, and there's a lot of things you need to answer, like, is it two-dimensional or three-dimensional? Is it a rectangle or an oval? Is it how far back on the plate is it set if it's two-dimensional? And all those decisions drive outcomes, right? So right now, one problem that we're focused on is we've been using this rectangular zone, which is obviously different than what the umpires call, and it's bumping the strikeout rate up. And the reason for that is that right now, major league umpires don't call pitches in the corners, strikes, or they call it less than 50% of the time. So your choices there are try to further sort of shrink the zone, or go with a weird looking shape, which doesn't really make sense. So anyway, so we're putting a lot of time and energy into a full scale test this year. Hopefully we come out of that with something that we think is viable at the big leagues, but sitting here today, we're not ready and don't think we're ready for showtime there.
Bill, your thoughts on all of that?
My number one thought is I'm very encouraged to meet Morgan and realize that this is in the hands of really, I'm sorry to be blowing sunshine up your skirt, but this is great. It really is. I'm so encouraged to meet you and listen to you talk about this stuff. We're in good hands. Thanks.
Morgan, perfect time to ask for a raise now by your perfect time. After that endorsement. Just put that on the resume, the quote specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
But Bill, the concept of the idea of automatic zones here, specifically the corners, your thoughts on the input and the back and forth that the Major League Baseball is trying to figure out, and the potential that called strikes on the outside corners raising strikeout rates?
Well, no one's in favor of raising strikeout rates, but have you considered the idea of an optional strike call area? That I wouldn't object if you added a couple of sides to the strike zone so that outside high corner isn't strike three. But I know a lot of people would. Is that viable? That there to have an area of the strike zone where the umpire has the
Where you
freedom.
can't challenge, basically.
Right, where you can't challenge, where the umpire can say what he wants.
We've talked about that. That's an interesting hybrid that maybe gets at that issue a little bit. Yeah.
Raul, as a hitter, the idea of a robot umpire behind you calling a called strike, like how would you approach everything as a hitter?
Well, going out and seeing it happen in person, I think one of the really surprising things for me personally was how much I enjoyed the challenge system and how much getting the feedback from the players and the on-field personnel in the minor leagues, how much they enjoyed the challenge system, because you do have the ability to challenge it. You get 3 challenges on each side, and if you're right, you get to keep it, and if you're wrong, you lose it. So there's a little bit of a team aspect, actually a lot of a team aspect to it, where if I use 2 challenges in a game and I'm wrong both times, I've taken 2 away from my team, and we may need that one in the 8th and 9th inning. So we got really positive feedback on that one. With the challenge system, I think that it would be a lot of fun, as a hitter, to be able to challenge those calls. And you would also expose how difficult a job the umpires actually have. The amount of times that when you're on the field and in the batter's box and you're arguing a call, and you go back and look at it on the video, and you're like, you know what, you were right. I was actually wrong. I think that there was a humbling aspect there to it, and this collaborative spirit where you're doing it as a team, you're doing it as a group, and at the same time, you might be wrong in the batter's box or on the pitcher's mound. We saw it happen quite a bit in the minor leagues. I watched a pitcher once. They had 2 challenges left, and he used them both in one at bat, and he went for a 3rd one the next time, and they were like, "You ran out of challenges." Yeah, so I think that was an encouraging and an exciting surprise for me to observe.
Yeah, and when you watch tennis, we've seen it all. Like, it's an immediate reaction, right? Let's keep the game going. Was it the ball in or out? Was it on the line? Any concern if you guys were to do something like this with challenges and limiting the number because of the timing aspect of the game? As Raul brought up, you get 2 challenges specifically.
Yeah, it's very quick. For those of you that have seen it or hopefully go to AAA game this year, you will see it. And the way we've been doing it is actually put it up on the video board. So nobody knows until it goes on the video board and you see the animation of the pitch, kind of like tennis used to do, and the crowd cheers. And it's fun. I think it's generated a lot of interesting discussion in our office because we have the ability to get every call 100% right, and this technology is unbelievably good. But it's been so interesting to hear people react negatively to doing that, right? And that baseball's kind of having this reckoning right now of it's another intrusion of technology into a game that is being weighed down by technology, and that we need to find a way to deploy it so that it improves the game and it makes it more entertaining and more charming and creates emotional connections for people and not get to ground truth. Because I think we're sort of discovering that that's not the goal, and that's not what people want, and that's not what fans want, it's not what the players want, and that's why this is proving difficult, because we sort of like, the tech guys have got there. I mean, they're amazing, and they've figured it out. And the question now is more about how do you harness this amazing technology to improve the game and make it better. We're not there yet.
You want to keep the soul and the nuance of the game still a part of the game. Bill, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I had 2 questions for you, Morgan. One is the robot umpire going to have a list of magic words that if you say one of these words? And the other question is, suppose I forget the name of that. It's fortunate that at the moment I forget the name of that umpire that everybody's always on his case and insists he's the worst umpire.
I won't remind you.
Yeah, not in public. You can tell me that. Is there going to be a consequence for umpires who let's say one umpire is overturned on challenge 80% of the time, and the next guy is 15% of the time? Is there going to be a consequence to that, you anticipate?
I mean, we'll have to work all that out with our umpires. They're unionized, and we're going to have to talk to them about ABS, and if we get to the point where we want to do it in the big leagues, we'll figure those issues out with them. It is funny that one of the things that I think was frustrating for the players and coaches about using what we call full ABS, where you call it for every pitch, is that there's no target for all of that aggression and adrenaline. So we actually had a player in the Arizona Fall League turn around and start screaming at this camera that was like behind home plate. And I get it, because you keep sort of removing these places for humanity to show itself on the baseball field. It's got to go somewhere. But anyway, so. Yeah.
It's a fantastic topic. We will see how that develops. And if we see some changes, you could say you heard it here first in 2023 at the Sloan Conference. Now, over on Twitter, we've got a hashtag baseball rules where our listeners have questions for the panel here. So we're going to go to some of these questions here. Morgan, you alluded to this being, quote, a rule, but personally, do you guys believe a 3-2 game in the 8th or 9th inning should have more time allotted than an 8-run game in the 4th inning?
No. And here's why. There's a couple reasons. One, if we got into a world where we turn the timer off or we give more time in certain innings or certain game situations, for one, it's going to affect players unequally, right? And it doesn't feel fair to have the closer play under a different set of rules than the rest of the guys in the bullpen. And secondly, if you think about what is an important situation, it is impossible to define, right? And there is no way to draw a clean line between the game situations where more time is needed and the game situations where you can play under the regular rules. So, that said, we are playing with an extra second in the big leagues relative to the minor leagues. So, but I think that this is something where we're all going to go through an adjustment period in the way that we watch this game, and you're going to watch a lot of big moments happen under the, existing time constraints, and it's going to be different. But we're confident that you're going to love it, and that it's going to be just a new way to watch this game that people are going to be happy about.
Bill, I want to ask you specifically, 17 years with the Red Sox, the background that you have, do you think front offices will change their approach in the offseason after seeing these rules changed on targeting specific players?
First of all, the stage one, the front offices will make a list of guesses as to what's going to happen, and make adjustments based on that. Stage two, after the season, they'll realize they were wrong on at least 95% of the guesses, and they'll undo whatever they did last year and start more down the correct path. That's my guess is what it'll be.
How will you look at the numbers, statistic-wise, and all the data that you're going to bring in, specifically like with relievers and the timing, because relievers take a lot longer than, the rhythm that we see from starters on the mound to pitch. How would you look at numbers differently now with this, the time clock?
I don't think so, because what we do in our field is to normalize everything anyway. So that, we started figuring out how to adjust for the fact that in the 1930s, the average batting average one year was 300. You have to normalize that. It's different in Colorado than it is in Seattle, so you have to normalize that. Basically, what we do all the time is normalize everything. So what we will do in our field is just normalize everything.
We're getting a ton of questions about injuries. Raul, have you guys entertained this idea that we may see an uptick in injuries from relievers with the 20-second clock coming in, and how quickly they have to throw the next pitch, and you don't get to take your time?
What I can tell you wholeheartedly, if there was any evidence or belief that this would be an injury concern for players, player health and safety comes first and foremost always. So if there were any evidence or any thought that would be the case, then we wouldn't be here right now.
Hypothetically, let's just say we start to see something like that. Would Major League Baseball become flexible on this concept of what you guys are doing? How flexible are you on these specific rules if you see a change here?
Yeah. So one of the many benefits of testing this in the minor leagues is that you get to track injuries, right? And we get to understand with some precision what happened. And pitching injuries were down pretty significantly last year in the minor leagues. And whether that's attributable to the timer, who knows? But positive nonetheless. I think that as prepared as we are, there is no chance that we got this all 100% correct in year one. And, we are definitely going to be discussing tweaks to all of this, as we go. But yeah, hopefully we're actually moving the other direction on injuries.
Fascinating conversation with my 10-year-old son a couple days ago. Morgan and I shared this with Morgan and Raul. So the Phillies are moving some of their games up to like 6:40. And with the pace of these games, he's 10 years old, he's got to go to bed before 9:30. But every single night in the summertime, we're arguing, hey, you got to go to bed. I want to watch this last inning, and now we're past 9:30, we're entering 10 o'clock. Yeah. Specifically, he talked about, and him and I went back and forth, where I was like, these games are going to potentially end, some of these Phillies games at like 9:15. He was beyond ecstatic by that. But time spending at the stadium plays a role here. Is there a concern that it's going to be less than 3 hours for the families spending time at the stadium, or is that a bonus thing? Have you guys discussed that?
Yeah, I'll give you my thought. I think it's a huge positive. I mean, I have young kids, and we have a lot of clubs that are going to move their weekday starts this year to 6:40. So that's, call it 25, 30 minutes of earlier ending time, and then we're taking probably 25 minutes off the game with the timer. You're talking about a full hour earlier now that weekday baseball games are going to end, and it becomes realistic for me to take my 6-year-old to Yankee Stadium on a weeknight in the summer, which prior to this year would have been completely impossible. And I think for those people that want a full 3-hour experience, I think they're welcome to show up early and watch batting practice.
We'll keep that in mind. Yes,
Seconding what he said, a lot of the Red Sox audience comes from Springfield or upstate or someplace. That's been a real drag on attendance. That it was so hard for people to watch the end of the game and then get home. Particularly weeknights, you can't take your kids to a game because the game ends at 11 o'clock and they get to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. You just can't do it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, especially when we're trying to bring in a younger crowd for the excitement of what we see from these baseball games. Really good question here I think we're going to address for everybody. You guys have attempted to tackle the pace of play. What is the next big hurdle for Major League Baseball to overcome from your perspective? I want to go down the line here and get all three of you guys on that question.
I think it's the strikeout rate. I think that's the white whale in baseball that, and it's a tricky problem. But I think the game, everybody or a lot of people in baseball would agree that the game's better when the average hitter's not striking out at Sandy Koufax's career strikeout rate and the ball's in play a little more. So I would put that as number one.
Yeah, well, he stole my answer. But
well, you gave it to him earlier, too. You brought that up.
Somehow we have to find some way to get younger kids more into. When our kids were young, every pediatrician we dealt with would tell us that put your kids into soccer. And the reason they would say that is that the baseball dads were over-enthusiastic and often tended to be complete assholes. Never mind. And
that's still happening. I see it every day.
Well, it's a long way away, but that's something we got to work on. We got to make sure that the soccer moms are just as offensive as the baseball dads.
Raul, what do you think is the biggest hurdle right now for Major League Baseball?
I would, at the risk of sounding repetitive and redundant, I would say that the strikeout rate is really a huge hurdle for us as an industry and as a game. And it's not just, hitter behavior, it's the stuff. Guys are throwing 100 miles per hour, high spin. We've gotten really, really good at the R&D part of this. I mean, private facilities like Driveline that have, gotten into pitch shaping and really maximizing how good pitchers have gotten and become. I think that's going to be a strong challenge for us moving forward.
Bill brought up something that was really interesting when we talked about, the pitcher's mound, inches in the batter's box, but also like doubles and how hits in different parks. Has Major League Baseball ever talked about, Morgan, the idea of, regulating park dimensions specifically to that point to change the concept of how we hit?
We've talked about everything. Yeah, that one in particular is on the less practical end of the spectrum because, well, one, it's very expensive to move fences around, and two, moving fences in, though it might sort of work against some of our on-field objectives, does generally bring fans closer to the game, create more good seating, and engage people. So it's not that one is a little trickier, but for sure, I think if you were just looking to get the ball and play more, moving the fences back would be a good idea.
We got 3 minutes left. I actually want to end this on a positive note. I want to get Bill's thoughts and then you guys. What's your favorite thing about baseball right now when you watch the game in the modern time?
You have, on some level, to enjoy the fact that the skills have gotten so outrageously good.
Yeah.
The average fan, I think, can see that the game really is better than it's ever been in a lot of different ways. And we have these issues, and people have gotten negative about them, but the game in a lot of ways is more fun than it's ever been to watch. And one reason for it is that the skill levels are so outrageously high. You just marvel at what hitters can do and what pitchers can do. To me, that's the answer.
Raul, you grew up with the game. You played. What's your favorite thing right now about the modern game? The game that you now in your position, not the game that you play, but the game you see now.
The athleticism, the strength, the power. I'm in awe. You go and watch guys in group 4 of batting practice that aren't even necessarily playing all the time, and they are able to launch the ball 460 feet to dead center field and miss-hit homers to the opposite field. I mean, the sheer strength, power, explosiveness of today's player, it's the best in history.
Yeah. If I could second that, one time about 2007, I was standing around a batter's box on a backfield in spring training watching David Ortiz hit, and he hit the ball. There was a team bus that was parked 30 feet outside the fence, and he was hitting the ball almost to the team bus, and I was so impressed by that. And then the young guy came up, Rizzo, and I'd never heard of him. This young guy steps in behind David. He was hitting the ball over the bus.
Just shows you the growth. Morgan, your favorite thing about the modern game right now?
Yeah, I would agree with these guys. And I think what I'm excited about this season is that you're going to see today's athlete, which is, I think, unequivocally the greatest that's ever played this game, the most powerful, the fastest, the most skilled, playing a game that looks a lot more like it did in the 1970s and 80s in terms of the pace and rhythm. And honestly, it's something none of us have ever seen before. And the spring training games I've found to be like gripping, that it changes the way you watch. You're used to looking at your phone between pitches, and that can't really happen anymore. And anyway, I think it's going to be a great year for baseball. I'm really excited.
Round of applause for these three for a fantastic job. Also, Jackson Spilka, our student lead, who did a great job putting this together. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.